Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the webinar, The Non-Obvious Guide to Being More Creative, with our presenter, Kathryn Haydon. My name is Lucy Sandell, and I'm the Senior Associate Director of Career Advancement for your Northwestern Alumni Association. We'll begin in a few minutes, and we're so excited that Kathryn can join us to speak about being more creative. But first, a few housekeeping items I'd like to share with you. You'll notice on the right-hand side of your screen that there are a few different tabs. Please send in your questions through the Q&A tab, or you can stick to the chat tab if that's what you prefer. I'll be monitoring both. We're saving time at the end of the presentation to answer your questions, so send them in now or throughout the webinar. Make sure you have a good internet connection with no other tabs open on your screen, as having them open can sometimes interfere with the audio portion. Should you experience any technical issues during the webinar, you can email the Big Marker team for further assistance at support@bigmarker.com. Lastly, a link to access the recording of the webinar will be sent to all registrants later today. Now let's move on to why we're all here. Kathryn Haydon's speaking, writing, and consulting is dedicated to answering the question, what if all people knew their full possibility as creative thinkers? With international clients across industries, from Bosch's Dremel Deji Lab to Webster's Bank to independent schools, she helps teams and individuals activate and maximize their creative thinking so that they can do their best, most innovative work. The founder of Sparkativity, Kathryn is the author or co-author of 4 books, including The Non-Obvious Guide to Being More Creative, No Matter Where You Work. She has written hundreds of articles on creative thinking, learning, talent development, and the secret strengths of outlier thinkers, which have appeared in publications from the Washington Post to Psychology Today. Kathryn earned her BA in Latin American and Spanish literature with a minor in economics at Northwestern University. She has a master's degree in creativity and change leadership from the acclaimed International Center for Studies in Creativity at the State University of New York. And now I'm handing over the mic to Kathryn. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. I'm so glad you're here. I'm sitting here just north of New York City with a cup of tea, and I invite you to grab your own hot drink. And in the chat box, please write your city and a hope that you have for this webinar. We'll give you a couple minutes to respond in the chat box, and throughout this webinar, Lucy's going to be monitoring the chat box, and she'll be pointing out certain things that you write to highlight it, to let me know what's being written in there. So I'd love to hear from you where you are dialing in from and a hope that you have for this webinar. I just love seeing
someone from Lebanon. Sorry.
Go ahead, Lucy. Go ahead.
Sorry. We have someone from Lebanon, New Hampshire, one of my favorite states. I'm from the East Coast, so love it there. Ukraine, San Rafael, Portland, Oregon, West Lafayette, Indiana, and Chicago, of course, Santa Clara. And some of the hopes are new tricks for spurring creative juices, improved creativity, innovative ways to approach a blog, and how to express thoughts in a creative fashion. So I'm going to jump off right now.
Fabulous. Well, these are great, and feel free to keep popping into the chat box at any point, and Lucy will let me know if any questions are coming up. We will have a Q&A later on in the program, and I'll be sure to get to all your questions, and Lucy will flag them. One of the things that I asked, obviously, is where you're coming in from. And Someone recently pointed out to me that I always ask where a person is from. I love to know where people are living and where they are actually from. And it could have to do with the fact that I've lived in a number of places, and also I'm just curious about where people's frame of reference is. I usually have a connection with somewhere where they live. I saw Turkey being populated in the chat box. I know a number of colleagues and professionals in the creativity realm that are doing work in Turkey. So there's always a connection, and I love seeing where people are from. I originally was born in Wilmette, just north of Chicago, right north of Northwestern, just probably a couple miles. And then I moved to Wheaton, west of Chicago. Then I moved to Evanston, lived in Lincoln Park for a bit, lived back in Evanston, finally moved to California into the Ojai Valley, which is very close to Santa Barbara. Then I now live in New York, and I have a picture of these a beautiful snow-covered sort of fall tree. I love the seasons here in New York. They're very beautiful. But I also have this picture of farmland. And this picture, I saw somebody is coming in from West Lafayette. This is actually just outside of West Lafayette, Indiana. And my roots are in Indiana, where our family farm sits. And this is a view from our family farm, and I just love that view. So that's a little bit about me and where I'm from. But again, as I said, I'm sitting here right now just north of New York City. My hope and objective for this webinar, and I think it dovetails with a lot of the objectives that you have been sharing in the chat box, that you will walk away with at least 5 key, non-obvious secrets to help you do your best thinking at work and in life. And when I say best thinking, I mean creative thinking, because as we will see, creative thinking truly is the most robust form of thinking that we can use and that we can exhibit and put forth. This webinar, as Lucy mentioned, is based on my new book, The Non-Obvious Guide to Being More Creative No Matter Where You Work. One thing I should point out, because I always forget to mention this, if you have the book and if you get the book, it is filled with so many resources. There's a website in the first few pages that you can go to called Non-Obvious Resources. There are downloads, there are all sorts of interesting resources, templates, tools, workbooks that you can get, and sometimes that can be overlooked because it's just one page in the book that says that. This book is the 5th in the Non-Obvious Guide series. This is a series that has had a soft launch over the course of this past year, and the official launch will be at South by Southwest 2020 in March. So if any of you plan to be at South by Southwest, do let me know. Send me an email or get in contact with me through my website. The publisher is having some fun secret parties, and I would love to put you on the guest list. And the other thing I should mention about the book is that last week it won an award in the business reference category for the American Book Fest. So we're really on a roll with this, and this is what the workshop is based on today. I wanted to put this up because Dan Pink, as many of you know, is a fellow Northwestern alum, and he was an early reader of this book and was kind enough to lend his enthusiasm for it. And he said that this smart and engaging guide will pay off in creative dividends. He actually said more. I shortened it for the slide. But he's a great supporter of creative thinking. And in fact, his book, A Whole New Mind, was one of the first I read in this genre that set me on the path to being an expert in creative thinking. So I have Dan Pink to thank. Now, it is story time. I'm going to start out by reading a short story. It may take about 5 minutes from the book. And this is my favorite story in the book. I just love it. And I know the thing about webinars. I'm on a lot of webinars, and I know that it's very easy to multitask, and that's what we all do. Part of creativity is being able to observe and to shift up our thinking. And I do invite you, because adults don't get read to very often, I do invite you to sit back, listen to this story, and at the end, we're going to go through 5 key points, and this will be very interactive and help you think in your life how you can apply them. The 5 key points are gleaned from the story, and I challenge you, as you're listening to the story, to perhaps jot down some things that you think might be those key points. And then after the story, we'll see how your notes square with the points that I bring up. So here we go. This story is called Why I No Longer Buy High Heels. The other night, I was giving a speech and running up and down the auditorium steps wearing black ankle boots that could have been a medieval torture device. After the event, I realized I would have to subject myself to another form of torture to fix the problem: shoe shopping. While I don't mind clothes shopping, I tend to dread shoe shopping because no matter what I do, it feels nearly impossible to get a pair of comfortable, fashionable shoes. So there I was, stuck driving to the mall on a gorgeous Saturday afternoon to conduct another search, probably in vain, for a pair of good-looking and comfortable shoes for a keynote the following week. Knowing my style, I loaded my arms with floor samples of the typical high-heeled choices as I canvassed the shoe department with low expectations. Being open to the crazy. My fate changed when I met a salesperson named Andre Paul Chin. He was dressed in a bright purple shirt and had a trace of a Jamaican accent. Andre Paul was funny, thoughtful, and cheerful as he dutifully brought me one uncomfortable pair of shoes after another. I wish the question weren't, which shoe will hurt the least, I remarked cynically. Seeing my frustration, he pointed to his own feet and his trendy, comfortable-looking kicks and explained how he had stopped wearing dress shoes last year. I decided not to suffer anymore, climbing stairs to retrieve boxes of shoes all day long. I went out and found a working shoe to take the place of every dress shoe, Andre Paul told me. I sighed. I wish I could do that, I said, dismissing the thought. But then he said he had a crazy idea. He popped open a new box and proceeded to slide a pair of slippers onto my feet. The familiar sheepskin felt heavenly after all those uncomfortable boots, and we had a good laugh about what might happen if I wore those on stage. However, wearing that quote-unquote ridiculous choice of slippers got me thinking in a new way. Looking at Andre Paul, I asked if he had any more unusual ideas. Clearly, it was the question he was waiting for, because his eyes lit up and he walked me to a table of sparkling, colorful, non-heeled possibilities. A tentative wave of rebellious excitement passed over me as he spoke. Why not make shoes your thing, he asked. Why not create your own style? To bring his suggestion back to reality, he promptly brought out boxes and boxes of eclectic designer sneakers inspired by Italian streetwear. Skater shoes, actually. All the while, he talked to me about starting a collection, buying a new pair every month, surprising audiences with different wild shoes each time. No one will know what you're going to show up in next. Clearly, Andre Paul was a gifted salesperson. But the possibility he was raising, that maybe, just maybe, I could forevermore work in comfort and create a signature style for myself, felt exciting. I began picturing my future self on stage with a collection of very expensive skater shoes. It was a major stretch. I started my career working for a bank when men and women both wore suits. I remember hearing once that there was even an employee whose job it was to measure the hems of women's skirts to ensure they weren't too short. I believed it. Yet, despite my long-held bias about what it meant to dress professionally, I decided to put my hesitation aside and buy a pair of those shoes. I'll admit that I had to think twice when getting dressed for that next keynote, but I took the risk and wore the shoes. During the talk, I practically floated around the room, weaving without fear of catching a heel among the dozens of tables as I spoke. Afterward, a crush of women came running up to me. "Thank you for wearing those shoes," they exclaimed, almost in unison. As it turns out, other people had the same shoe problem I did. By going out on a limb and doing something different to solve it, I paved the way to help them find a solution too. Why it starts with taking a risk. Of course, this book isn't about buying a different pair of shoes or succumbing to the charm of a friendly and effective salesperson. It's about being willing to take a risk that can open your mind to being more creative. Sometimes all you need is a gentle nudge from a guide like Andre Paul showing you the path. The aim of this book is to be that nudge. In the coming chapters, you will learn how to harness your creativity using the same methods that have worked for thousands of professionals I have had the honor of mentoring and coaching. The curated collection of tools and techniques I share in this guide will help you adopt a mindset that helps you break through what I call the inertia of no. More on that later. Above all, you will understand how thinking creatively can help you overcome limiting assumptions and do what both Andre Paul and I did in that moment back at the shoe store. And finally, the last mini section of this story, what Nordstrom knows about creativity. Andre Paul's choice to change his footwear forced him not only to change his mindset, but to navigate the corporate culture at a large retailer that could have immediately dismissed his idea. In a culture of no, he might never have attempted to make this change, anticipating that it would be shot down. But when the managers at Nordstrom were open to Andre Paul's slight shift in dress code so that he could better serve customers and therefore make more sales, they sent a signal and reaffirmed creativity as part of the store culture. His manager's acceptance signaled that seeking new possibilities was welcome. They were open to new ideas and willing to be flexible to help employees do their best work. What if you could work at a place like that? What if you could be a person like that? You can, and this book will show you how. So that's my story about Andre Paul. And I love this story so much because in his interactions with me, Andre Paul created what I call a possibility ecosystem. And a possibility ecosystem sounds like it could be complicated, but it's actually something we can do in one-on-one interactions. We can do it with an entire company, an entire culture, but we can also do it with our day-to-day interactions with one other person. And the way he did this was he used his creative thinking to help me solve a very real problem that I was facing. Yes, I bought more shoes and more expensive shoes than I was planning. I actually am going to admit to you that I bought 5 pairs of shoes that day, and I brought a friend back a couple weeks later and she bought 5 pairs of shoes. So that definitely helped Andre Paul meet his sales goals. But I bought these shoes because he helped liberate me from the tyranny of speaking in uncomfortable shoes. He released me from the expectations that I'd imposed on myself, and he helped me to have more fun working. So the book, The Non-Obvious Guide, teaches you in great detail how to deliberately develop a mindset and use strategies and tools to create a culture of possibility and growth. But I've boiled it down in this webinar to 5 key points that you can start with. And these 5 key points are woven throughout the book, and they're very easy to grasp, and we're going to have you work with them a little bit during the webinar so you can actually make some progress in applying creative thinking and using techniques for creative thinking and applying it right to your context. So the number 1 point is that Andre Paul overcame and broke through the inertia of no. I mentioned that term briefly in that story, but it comes from a definition of creativity that I introduce in the book. And this is the definition. breaking through the inertia of no by seeking new possibilities and finding valuable solutions. So again, creativity is breaking through the inertia of no by seeking new possibilities and finding valuable solutions. There's a lot in that little definition, but the first thing to focus on is the inertia of no. And in my story, the inertia of no is something that I do define, but it's a new term that I made up. But when I say it, everybody knows what it means. Everybody intuitively says, oh yeah, I've encountered the inertia of no. So I have a question for you, and feel free to respond in the chat box. In my story about Andre Paul, what might have been all the things that could have been characterized as the inertia of no, do you think? Without me defining it first, what do you think were instances of the inertia of no that popped up in those interactions? And just type your thoughts in the chat box, if you will. I may have a delay in getting chats, so they're starting to come in now. Exactly. People won't take me seriously. These shoes aren't black. Those were some of my conceptions that I had that were hemming me into only a limited number of choices. Yes, I will stand out. People will laugh. Those are exactly the type of pieces of the inertia of no. The assumption that women should wear heels to be professional, exactly. I was definitely living under that assumption. Yep, wearing high heels. Some others that I was just doing a live talk last night, and some others that people were saying were my low expectations. So I was going into the situation thinking, oh, there's no way around this. I'm just going to have to suffer. Yep, it won't work. I've never thought of that before. These are good ones coming in. I may have to delay, as I said, in getting your responses. But my own background dressing professionally, I've never thought about being a skater. I don't know how to ride a skateboard, so maybe it's a little impostery to wear skater shoes. But I had those type of misconceptions. The inertia of no, defining it, is often beliefs, assumptions, and fears that we perceive to be obstacles. And so often they are actually not obstacles or actually not real. They're just something we have in our mind that once identified can be easily solved for or overcome. So this is the time when you actually can write down, if you have a piece of paper, open up a new file on a note on your phone or a file on your computer, and jot down all the different ways that you encounter the inertia of no in your life. What are some assumptions, beliefs, things people say that seem to hold you back or seem to cause problems in your life? And just jot them down. And you can obviously add to your list, but I'll be quiet for a few moments so you can think. So feel free to keep thinking and adding to your list, but I will say that very interestingly, after I had written this introduction to the book, you may know Harvard Business School professor Francesca Gino. She came out with a great book called Rebel Talent, and she actually did kind of a study that showed that wearing weird shoes or different types of clothing that aren't considered traditional are actually make people seem more powerful or more confident. I can't remember the exact terms, but I do recommend that book, and I just think it was very interesting. My publisher at the time said, "You've got to read Francesca Gino's book." She talks about wearing, I think, red Converse to teach at Harvard, which was really thought to be a no-no. So she had a very similar experience. But again, this is not about shoes. It's about breaking through the inertia of no. The second thing that Andre Paul did was he began with what bothered him. He had been bothered a year before by his own feet hurting. He was wearing very, very tight, black, shiny dress shoes all the time, every day. And instead of complaining and being stuck, he thought of ways to solve it. He figured out a way to hit a balance between the required dress code and his comfort. And so he found some shoes that would work for him. And this type of thinking in his own life helped him be open to solve my problem too, by noticing what bothered me. So my question for you, and this may relate to the previous question, is what are some of the problems that you find yourself running into again and again? Jot them down. It could be at work. It could be at home. Maybe it's an observation of somebody else, someone in your family, someone at work that's having a problem again and again. If it's not you, it can be someone. It's key to observe the problems that we keep facing, that we keep complaining about. So jot them down. Jot down some problems, and you're going to need these. So you have to think of at least a couple. So hopefully you found a few problems. I love the idea that when we want to be more creative, people often feel like creativity is so pie in the sky and ambiguous. But when we think about, we can begin with problems and what bothers us or annoys us. That's usually a pretty easy place to start. So what else did Andre Paul do? First, he broke through the inertia of no. Number 2, he began with what bothered him. Number 3, he asked a possibility question. One way to break through the inertia of no, or to outsmart the inertia of no, is to use a special question asking formula to turn a complaint into a possibility question. So if I had been using my own advice and not complaining and thinking I would never solve this, I would say, instead of I'm never going to find comfortable shoes for speaking, I would say, what might be all the different ways I can be more comfortable while speaking? I would use that formula. What might be all the ways? It's a question starter. Another one is how might? How might I be more comfortable while speaking? How might I find footwear that is more comfortable? Andre Paul may not have used those exact words, but implicitly, this is what he was doing when he brought different possibilities. So let me share just a couple things that we might hear at work along those lines. So we might hear this: we don't have the budget for it. That's the problem. If we turn it into a possibility question, we use that starter. What might be all the ways to get funding? Another one that often comes up at work: we are too busy to think creatively. We can use how might. How might we free up time to dedicate to creative thinking? So those are a couple common ones that are in the book. There are more, but how can you change your problems into possibilities, into possibility questions? So I invite you to look back at that list of things that bug you, things that annoy you, problems that you've been running into, and choose one. Choose one of the challenges you wrote down and turn it into a possibility question. So I'm going to type in the chat box those two sentence question stems, they're called. How might is one, and what might be all the ways is another. So go ahead and turn your challenges into possibilities for yourself. Actually, just one of them. Just one of them. The fourth thing that Andre Paul did was he used the science of good thinking. And I say good thinking because the science of creative thinking is good thinking. It is, like I said at the very beginning, the most robust, highest level of thinking. If you've ever been trained in education, you've probably been trained with Bloom's taxonomy. And Bloom's taxonomy says that creative thinking is the highest level of thinking and in learning. So it's also the highest level of thinking we can bring to work and to our lives. So doing this deep, consistent, original thinking and problem solving is based on principles from a vast body of research that comes from the science of creativity. And this is, all my work is based on this body of research. I didn't write as extensive endnotes as I'm always tempted to, but there are a lot of endnotes in the book to support the origin of things like these sentence stems, these question-asking stems. So in the shoe department, we weren't officially having a brainstorming session, but I followed the key guidelines for creative thinking, which was to separate ideational thinking from analytical thinking. When we think of creative thinking, especially at work, we think of brainstorming. Well, it's actually true if we go back to the definition of creativity that I shared at the beginning. Creativity is breaking through the inertia of no by seeking new possibilities and finding valuable solutions. Built into that definition are the two types of thinking that we need to use. Seeking possibilities, which is imaginative thinking, visionary thinking, original thinking, versus finding valuable solutions, which is analytical thinking, judgmental thinking, critical thinking that we use when we're actually vetting ideas. There are guidelines to each of those, and really important guidelines. So many people think of creativity and have had horrible experiences in brainstorming sessions gone wrong. But if we actually follow pretty strict guidelines to doing them in a very structured way, it allows so much possibility to come forth because everyone starts at the same level. You allow for crazy ideas. You allow for ideas that really, if you were putting on your analytical thinking hat, you'd think, no, this is never going to work. And my experience in the shoe department was just that way. I deliberately knew that when he was putting forth ideas, I had to allow them to come forth. So the skater shoes, my initial reaction would be, oh, come on, no way. Excuse me. But in that case, I was using the science of good thinking. And I wanted to allow those to come forth. If I hadn't, I would have shut down the ideas and not solved the problem. So that piece, separating ideational thinking from analytical thinking, is so important. And I have this picture of a car driving because if you don't separate them, it's sort of like driving like a driver's ed student, where you accelerate, step on the brake, accelerate, step on the brake. In a lot of ways, that seeking possibilities is acceleration, and the brakes are finding valuable solutions and using analytical thinking to really vet those solutions and make maybe marginal ideas into fantastic, robust solutions. So I want to give you the opportunity to try that. Take your possibility question that you created for the last point and take a few moments to think up 5 crazy or not so crazy ideas to solve it. The ideas can be terrible, they can be ridiculous, they can be any type of ideas. The key is you just have to write down any idea that you think about to solve it, anything that comes to your head. They don't have to be good, but just write them down, allow them to come forth. So I'll give you a few moments to think of 5 ideas to solve your challenge. So hopefully you have 5 ideas by now. If you don't, keep writing them down as we go to the next topic. But we are now at number 5. So we have covered Andre Paul breaking through the inertia of no, beginning with what bothered him, asking a possibility question, using the science of good thinking, and turning your idea into a great solution. Pop it. Now, if you have been on a webinar with me before, I did one last year, and I also introduced this tool, but I think it is so important that I wanted to introduce it again in this context, because though Andre Paul didn't use the specific tool in the format, I incorporated its principles in my interactions with him. So rather than explain to you how I did it in that circumstance, I'd like for you to try it out for yourself. So I will show you how to use this tool to turn maybe a bad idea or an okay idea into a great solution. Now, what I would love to do, I'm just going to go through it. It's a little funny, I know, with kind of a one-sided interaction. But I will trust that you are actually doing this work on the other side. I don't think anyone needs to share in the chat box, but just do it for yourself and see where it takes you. So how you start is this. At the very top of your page, put your possibility question. So it might be, what might be all the ways? And then your challenge. What might be all the ways to improve my time? What might be all the ways to get funding to train my team? What might be all the ways to improve our product line? What might be all the ways to bring more harmony into my family? Whatever it is that you are working on, put it at the top of your page. Then write your idea that you're working with. So maybe you have those 5 ideas, pick one of them. There is a science also to picking ideas. We're not going to go through that today, but just pick one of them that you think maybe is kind of a bad idea. Maybe it has a little potential. It's something new to you and you'd like to try it out. And put that under your question at the top of your page, your solution idea. So you've got your question, your possibility question, and your idea. Now, you're going to think about what are the positives about this idea. So, what's good about it? What might work about it? And jot those down. So the next piece is opportunities. What opportunities might result if you were able to use an idea like this to solve your problem? So as an example, I was working on, I was running a workshop the other day in Toronto, and the group was working on a challenge on how to decrease waste. And one of the thoughts was, okay, well, if we are able to use this idea to decrease waste, an opportunity might be that we actually spend less money. It might be that we save a number of trees. So those are kind of the opportunities. It's something kind of visionary in the future. What might happen if you were able to successfully use this idea? So those two are our divergent thinking in this tool. There are possibility thinking. Now we shift gears and we put on our analytical, convergent, critical thinking hat. What are your concerns about this idea? What obstacles might you run into about this idea? What people might try to block it? What weaknesses do you see in the idea? So you jot those down. once you have all those down, and feel free after this call to go back and really work this through and spend more time in doing it if it's a problem that's worthy that you would like to really work on solving. It will be powerful for you. But for now, with those concerns that you wrote down, choose one of them that may be the number one concern to blocking the moving forward of this idea. So it might be, okay, this is a great idea. I need to improve the time I spend at work. So I'm working on things that are really within the realm of my expertise. Maybe a major concern would be my boss needs to get on board. I don't know how my boss will respond. So take that problem and turn it in the next section, inquiries, into a possibility question. So that would turn into, okay, my boss might block this effort. What might be all the ways to get my boss on board? So turn your concern into a possibility question. And once you have that, you're going into thoughts and new thinking. So you're taking that question, what might be all the ways to get my boss on board? And you're turning that into, you're again going back to ideational thinking and thinking up ways to solve that. So you might say, well, I could just pitch this to my boss as an experiment. Nothing permanent, just as an experiment. Or, maybe I'll have this particular conversation with my boss, or whatever it is. Think up the new ideas to overcome the issues that are blocking your idea. Of course, if you have a number of concerns, you can go through that process again and again with all the concerns and figure out a way forward. Again, go back to this when you have time. Use it for many things. I love this tool so much. There are many ways to use it. You can probably think up more. But here are 10 ways, this is from the book, to use Pop-It, to evaluate your own new ideas, to respond to suggestions. So if somebody comes to you with something and your tendency is to immediately shut it down or to say, no, that won't work. Instead, use this format. First, tell them the positives about it, the opportunities that might result. Pose the problem as a possibility question. And then together you can work through solving it. Or you might find that just posing it as a question helps reveal that that wasn't a good idea in the first place, or you might find a way to improve upon that idea. This is a fabulous technique for performance reviews, even for yourself. Meeting and event feedback. I give this form in all of my trainings to solicit feedback, to find out what I'm doing well, and to find out how I can improve and to get people specific ideas. Grading student papers, developing solutions with the team, a culture shift tool, because if everybody on your team is using more or less this format, then you are able to move new thinking forward constantly. It again helps you practice separating your thinking. This is a great way to structure a complaint because it takes people off of the defensive. And it starts with, this is actually good, but how might we solve this in the end? But you're putting in the time to show them that you actually really care about taking their idea seriously and working through the weaknesses of the idea. Also, I love this as pre-work for people who pose half-baked ideas. So if you have someone coming to you that's always bringing up something that is not thought through, you can ask them to run their ideas through this format before they bring it to you, or give it to them every time they bring an idea and send them back and do that. These are just a few ways to use this tool. It's different from a typical pros and cons tool that we would typically use, because pros and cons, you end up with a list of what's good and what's not good about the idea, but you don't have a pathway for moving it forward and pushing it towards new thinking to either come up with another idea or overcome the weaknesses. So I coach a lot of teams to replace pros and cons with this. For feedback, I see that question. an example for feedback or a performance review, you might say, and I have used this with people, you might say, well, I'll go back to this so you can see it. What's good about what you've been doing? It's great. You've been putting in a lot of effort. You've been attending to the details. You've been building relationships with our customers. Because you've been doing this, we might strengthen our sales because of your customer relationships. We won't keep sort of overlooking details, et cetera, et cetera. But there are a few things that I think we can work on. This might be, you are leaving early too often. You're not putting in enough time. Okay, what might be all the ways to structure your time so you do put in enough time, but you can also have the work-life balance that you need, and then together you can work through that question to find the possibilities. I do have a great example in the book of somebody coming to their boss saying, I need to work from home 3 days a week. And instead of saying, no, we don't do that here, the boss says yes, or really asks a question and says, oh, well, why? And the person says, well, because I have these morning calls with India, traffic has been getting worse, I'm not able to make the morning calls with India and get to our morning meeting with the traffic. So then you have a solvable problem. And that was just by asking why. But in that case, you can then turn that into, okay, how might we restructure your days so that you can meet all your responsibilities? So that's kind of how you would use it for feedback. So I love this quote, all people and teams are capable of generating awesome ideas, but it's usually the process that falls short. Poppet is an example of a creative process tool. Actually, creativity and creative thinking processes are actually quite structured. And a lot of people are afraid that if they introduce creative thinking at work on their teams, it's going to result in chaos. It's actually completely the opposite. There are a lot of structures around it that help us work within the limits of what we need, work within our criteria, work within our business model, but to allow space for new thinking. And the key is to use these processes consistently and build them into the DNA of your company, build them into the culture, build them into the process, build them into the interactions. When companies don't do this at all levels, they get disrupted, end of story, because they're not able to harness the new thinking that they need at all levels. And a lot of times it's customer-facing employees and non-leadership employees that are the ones that are spotting problems if you give them the tools and create a culture that invites creative thinking throughout, invites new thinking, problem solving, new ideas, and progress. Something that CEOs have been saying for at least 10 years, probably 20 years, but surveys started coming out in about 2011 saying CEOs are determining that creative thinking is the number one job leadership characteristic needed to get ahead. Now that has been becoming more and more critical because we face so much change. One of my favorite statistics this year, LinkedIn Learning they culled through all their data, 20 million job postings, more than that, and found that creativity is the number one skill employers are looking for in employees across the board. So this is coming to everybody. Just recently, a study by the MIT IBM Watson AI Lab found that once AI takes over job tasks, creative thinking skills are the most valuable and highly paid. And also in this study, they found that it's middle managers that are most likely to get their jobs taken away by AI. So if you're a middle manager in any industry, or really anyone in any industry, having creative thinking skills and beefing up your creative thinking skills is important to keeping yourself marketable and valuable to potential employees or your own employer. Finally, the World Economic Forum, they show that they show 10 skills that are very important to jobs in 2020. And this slide is actually from a workshop that I was delivering, but this workshop that I was delivering, and a lot in this book, trains 5 of the top skills. So complex problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, coordinating with others, and cognitive flexibility. So there is a lot out there. On my blog at sparkativity.com, I also have a blog at Psychology Today. I have a great article that I think is called 10 Statistics About Creativity That You Need to Know. And this IBM one is very new, but the LinkedIn Learning and the World Economic Forum are in there. If you need to convince your team or your boss that creative thinking is needed on your team, those statistics are very helpful. So, as I have alluded to, powerful creative thinking increases employees' ability to turn problems into possibilities. And I was very interested in this. Recently, I led a 3-hour ultimate creative thinking workshop with a number of professionals, including CEOs, lawyers, people in corporate trainers, people in all sorts of fields. And they spent just over the time it takes to watch a movie with me and my colleague. And these are the things that they said they were taking away: being more open, more focused, more confident, rewarded, more inclusive, improved communication. They saw direct application of all these characteristics and processes to work. And they thought, wow, we can really be better at our jobs. And the great thing is that you can get this. There are many resources for being more creative. And this book was designed as a mini course. Its tagline is called like having coffee with an expert. So every time somebody says, oh, I want to pick your brain over coffee about the most important things about creative thinking, I try to think about that because I hate the term pick your brain. So never say that to me if you reach out to me. But anyway, people say it all the time. But this brings together all of these important key points, easy points that you can apply just one at a time, piecemeal, on your day, in your daily work. So I would love to know, just from what we've done so far, and we're nearing the end of what I've prepared, but what is one idea that you could see yourself applying from what we've discussed so far? And write it in the chat box, please. Something that somebody did ask was, should everyone in the team be the creative thinkers during brainstorming? Absolutely. And there should be one person that's facilitating, probably the boss, that's maybe not being the creative thinker, not putting out ideas, to let others have a chance to do that. So I see the possibility reframe question. Yes, that's one of my favorites. So you can feel free to keep adding. If you want to dig deeper with what I have to offer, I have a couple things free. The Spark Report comes out every other week. You can go to sparkativity.com/signup, and it will give you access to a ton of resources and also the Spark Report that comes out. So it's always writing to you to say, how can you apply these ideas in your life, at work, etc. Obviously, we have the non-obvious guide to being more creative that's at your disposal. It's very reasonable for all that it contains. The Ultimate Creative Thinking Workshop is a workshop that's been such a great success to go along with the book on this book tour I've been doing, and it's available to train teams. So we can come in and train your team, train others in a professional network, and it's very fun to do, very interactive, and it packs in a ton in 3 hours. And then there's personal coaching, and we have a special Northwestern discount for all services booked through the end of the year. So feel free to email us at inspired@sparkativity.com for that. And I got kind of crazy with these dog pictures, but please put in your questions and I will do my best to answer them. I'd love to hear what you're thinking. Somebody said, will you go back to the Poppet template slide? Yes, now the Poppet template is in the book. If you do have the book, you can go to that non-obvious resource page and you can download the entire workbook and all of the templates in the book, and it's all free. It comes with the book. You just have to go to a website, a web page. Any other questions that you have? I do love questions, so feel free to type them in. So there's that. Well, thank you all. Before anyone leaves, I thank you all for being on today, but I will be here to answer questions. If you would like to linger in the webinar, I will wait to see if anyone has a last minute one, but I'm so grateful you all joined from all over the world, all over the United States, and I hope that this was useful to you and that you can apply it today.
I second Kathryn's words. I really appreciate all of you attending, and for those of you who are our stalwarts who come to just about every single webinar we do, thank you so much. This is our last webinar of 2019. So if you think about it as a relay race, Kathryn has been our anchor, which is a great position because we always rely on the anchor to win the race. So thank you, Kathryn. You've been awesome. This is really interesting material. And if you have any last tips for us, Kathryn, I hand it back over to you.
Well, I see a question in there that says, how has creativity changed your life? And I will say that deliberate creativity is so interesting to me. When I started studying, and everything I've talked about today is deliberate creativity. So it's using processes and strategies and principles in our daily life to, in fact, be more creative, to solve problems, to get unstuck, to be free. So that has really changed my life because I am able to then apply that to my writing process, to creating, I do a lot of writing, but book writing, article writing, to developing workshops, and I'm able to understand where I show up in the creative process. So that's something we didn't talk much about at all, creative process, but there are distinct stages to that, and people have distinct preferences in which stages they like or dislike. And I found when I started studying this that, wow, I really like some and I dislike others. And I was able to find strategies to actually power up my process throughout and know, okay, when I get to this part of the process, I know that my energy decreases. So here is what I'm going to do about that so I don't get stuck or so I don't start to procrastinate. So I've been very grateful for these principles that are so easily applied and that we can just sort of make as habit, and then we're able to be much more prolific in our work. Let's see. I don't know about menu item. So Lucy will have, Lucy answered that. There's a chat, Q&A, and handouts. You can see that. What is one book you would recommend to think about how to apply creativity in any job? Well, The non-obvious guide to being more creative, truly. It's not a joke. I actually have so many creativity books here on my shelf. Um, Many of them are not written to be applied to work. Um, and I have some that I really like, but are very, very dense, more academic studies. So I really do like this one because it's really the only one I know that's so practical and that doesn't confuse people about being artistic. Um, it involves very practical problem solving, yet it's very deep. So I'm sorry to say that I would like to recommend somebody else's book, but I do love that. But if you ask it a different way, I might be able to come up with a different book. Um, I love that about your kids are your teachers. Oh yes, on how to develop creativity in kids. Yes, there are so many on that. I will say that, but I'm looking at my shelf. One of the great books, this isn't necessarily a practical guide for kids, but this book called Creating Innovators by Tony Wagner is one of my favorites about how important it is to raise kids not to be like everybody else, and how to raise kids with entrepreneurial thinking. As entrepreneurial thinkers, it has a lot of examples of parents who have done so. I find that very inspiring. It doesn't have tools and things like that, but it does have a lot of examples that are inspiring to help you keep it. There's so much pressure to make your kids be like everyone else, and it shows why it's important to maintain their own distinct differences and support those. So that's a good one.
I just want to say thank you again, Kathryn. Thank you all, everyone. I hate to do this, but we're just over time, and I have to give up the room. So we're gonna end here. Take care. Have a good rest of your day, and go Cats.
Yes, go cats.